Motherhood has been the part of my life that has brought me both the most incredible joy and the deepest of pain. And being my own mother's child carries with it another set of consistent difficulties and challenges. I will call my father later today, and he will be sad as well because his mother is gone. And I get it. Today is not a joyous day for a great many people. And I just want you to know as we continue in this teaching this morning that I see you, I feel you, I am you. And I would have skipped the whole Mother's Day celebration altogether. However, behind Christmas and Easter, this is the day when most people will attend church. So I have a captive audience. Plus, motherhood, caregiving in general, is a very noble gift that does deserve to be honored and celebrated, despite the trials and difficulties with it. We're going to be hopping around to several different places in Scripture this morning. I almost put a picture of a frog where it says Scripture in your thing, but I didn't think some people would think that was funny. So we're going to start with the story with a mother in Scripture this morning who's so amazing, she can only exist within a story. Yet her story is so famous. I am willing to wager that about 60% of churches this morning are hearing sermons based on this same scripture. And that is what we find in Proverbs 31, beginning with verse 10. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city. Now, this is a conflicting piece of scripture. It's both beautiful and oppressive at the same time. We see an ideal woman who is able to do everything in her daily life well and in a godly manner. Yet reading her story can make almost any woman feel extremely inadequate. This piece of scripture has been used as a weapon at times to point out the shortcomings and failings in the experiences of women. Now, I don't know about you, but just reading that scripture begins to make my anxiety rise. I am tired before I even get to the end of the passage. She buys wool and flax and busily spins it. I don't even know what flax is. She makes warm clothes for everyone in her household. My husband is often getting rips and tears in his work clothes and bringing them to me and saying, "Could you fix this?" And I always say the same thing. Who do you think you married? She has no fear of aging. The vanity in my bathroom looks like a deranged alchemist lab. She gets up before dawn to make breakfast for her family and her servants. People, if I am up before dawn, there is something very, very wrong with the universe, and you should be concerned with far more than what you're going to get for breakfast. My preferred fashion choice runs towards flannel and not towards purple linen. And I'm going to be real honest with you. My children have called me many things, but I don't recall blessed being one of them. In fact, I once took one of those online quizzes that you see on Facebook or places sometimes about which sitcom mom would you be? And I thought maybe I might. I knew I wasn't going to be June Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver, but I thought I might get a Claire Huxtable, a calm, wise mother handing out advice for her slightly wayward children. Instead, I got this gal. I was talking to my oldest son, Jacob, about that quiz, and I was telling him how disappointed I was because I really thought that he was like, yeah, I can see it. Definitely not called blessed. And I was definitely not perfect, but yet I was just the perfect, less than perfect mother that my children needed. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing our journeys as mothers to others. Also, if we're comparing ourselves to Proverbs 31, and we know that comparison is the thief of joy. If we continue to do that, it will take a great deal away from our experience. But how are women supposed to live up to characteristics like those we read of in Proverbs 31? Well, there's good news. I was once lamenting to a ministry mentor of mine about not liking Proverbs 31 very much due to the amount of pressure I felt that it put on women to be just like what was described, a super woman, the perfect wife, Wonder Woman. She said, well, she's an awful lot like Wonder Woman, all right, because she doesn't really exist. And I said, excuse me? And so she explained it to me. She said the Proverbs 31 woman is not a real person. She is, in fact, a fairy tale, or more correct, she's a nursery rhyme. She's one that Jewish mothers would use to teach their sons to remind them of what to look for in a marriage partner. And the story is probably included in Proverbs because it was most likely taught to Solomon by his mother, Bathsheba. Yes, that Bathsheba. This is an acrostic poem, the verses of which begin with the successive letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So, biblically speaking, we are off the hook about living up to this fairy tale. However, the society in which we lived often tells us that we can and should be able to get it all done and look nice while doing it. And women, especially mothers, put ourselves under enormous pressure to be perfect, at least to look like it from the outside looking in. It's a ridiculous challenge that always seems to make us feel like we're falling short, like we're failing. For the past few weeks, we've been looking at parts of scripture that don't actually say or mean what we think they do. We talked last week about pursuing holiness rather than happiness, and I feel like that is a pursuit that we must take into our efforts at parenting and caregiving as well. Please know, as I'm talking about mothers today, it could be transferred onto fathers or caregivers of any kind. And I thought we might take an honest look at the stories of some women in scripture, mothers, to see what we can take away from their actions and experiences as they pursued God in the midst of parenting, even when it was difficult, even when it involves heartbreak. Now, the world has always been a little bit, actually a lot, of a dangerous place for mothers and children. There's brutality to their stories, and there's a very real component when we read scripture to understanding the question that's wandering around in our society this day. Would you choose a man or would you choose a bear? And because of this truth, I believe that mothers read the Bible a little bit differently. When we're reading, we consider how it would feel to be unable to feed our children like the widow who encounters Elijah. Or we consider what it felt like to put Moses in a basket as Jochebed did, knowing that he would live and then having to offer ourselves as a servant just so we can be with our own child. And it's hard as a mother not to be enraged when Lot offers up his daughters to be raped, or when David doesn't react at all to the rape of his only daughter Tamar, or when Abraham goes up into the mountain to offer a sacrifice to the Lord, except he's not taking a sacrifice with him, only his son Isaac. The journey of motherhood is usually nowhere near perfect. In fact, it's often very frightening and at times excruciatingly painful. There are no guarantees. You might think you know what's going on, what to expect, what to do, and then boom, life comes along and everything changes. You can do everything right. You can be pretty close to perfect. You can be the Mary Poppins of your cul-de-sac. And your children can still turn out to be really awful. Ted Bundy, Hitler, Mengele, Pol Pot, Jim Jones, Jeffrey Epstein, they all had mothers who we can assume provided care for them. Now, the opposite of that is also true. Some really amazing and godly people had truly awful parents, and some of their stories are in here. Any teacher can tell you there's always that one kid in the room where you wonder over and over what their problem is. And then you meet their parents. And you say, huh, I get it now. As much as we would like to think that we are doing just fine, we know in our hearts deep down that we aren't perfect. We know that at some point we either have or we're going to drop the ball. And that's okay. In Scripture, motherhood is not a story of perfection, but one of prayer and petition and persistence and presence. Consider Eve, the first mother who lost one of her children at the hands of another child of hers. Consider Rebecca, Isaac's wife, who struggled with the favoritism of her children, her husband's favoritism for Esau, and her own favoritism of Jacob. And we can read of the persistence and the perseverance of Leah and Hagar in the midst of not being favored and feeling, as we so often all do, of being invisible, that they didn't count. Leah was definitely not the favorite. She was not the favorite daughter. She was not the favorite wife. She was not the one that everybody loved. She was always less than and always having to compete with her sister Rachel for everything she had. And yet, Leah is the one who is buried with Jacob, with Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah, and with Rachel's own son, Joseph, in the ancestral tomb. And Leah, most importantly, is the mother of Judah and in the direct lineage of the ancestry of Jesus the Christ. Hagar, the handmaid of Sarah and the mother of Ishmael, truly a victim of circumstances beyond her control, but that is a lesson for another day. She is the mother of the firstborn son of Abraham, and life for her should have been pretty cush. Yet she was thrown away and banished with her child, like garbage or a shawl that someone had tired of wearing. And you can hear Sarah coming up with this plan that Hagar is an integral part of, and maybe Hagar wanted nothing to do with it, but she was not in a position to say no. And so the plan went forth, and this child came to be. And then we hear Sarah say, I don't like this very much. This isn't working out the way I thought it would, so get rid of it. And it's a story of many women and mothers feeling discarded or tossed aside at some point. And you see Hagar in the wilderness crying in her pregnancy. And you see a Christophany, a vision of Christ in the Old Testament, coming to her, seeing her. And she calls him El Royo, the God who sees me. And she is one of the few people in Scripture who sees God face to face and doesn't experience death. They teach us to press on, to persist, and to lean into God's promises that He will provide even when we feel unseen and alone. And then we have Salome. I don't know if that's the way you say her name, but I like it that way. It might be Salome. Salome. And through her, we learn the power of purpose and petition. Salome is the mother of James and John. And Scripture tells us that she's at the cross. that she is the sister of Mary and she is the mother of thunder. I have felt that way sometimes. Probably she is Jesus's aunt. She's obviously very close to him. And we know that she wanted great things for her sons. And so she went and asked Jesus for them. And this is a story in scripture we often approach with shock and judgment. But as a mother reading it, I get it. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" And she said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit at your right hand and the other at the left in your kingdom." That's in Matthew 20. Now, Mark has an account that's slightly different than this, where the brothers make the request themselves instead of with their mother, but the effect is still the same. Salome had a vision, a purpose, and plans for her son, and so she went to Jesus and asked him to provide it. Even if she doesn't truly understand yet who Jesus is, or what God's plans for him are, or the plans for her sons, she is still bold enough to ask Jesus to provide for her children. What can they be in your kingdom, Jesus? Now, that's a question that every parent should be asking. No one expects more of a child than their mother does. She often has great dreams for his or her future success. There's an old anecdote about a Jewish mother who had twins, and as she was pushing them in a stroller through town, she would introduce them to everyone passed by. "This is my son, the doctor. This is my daughter, the lawyer." We have expectations for our children, and we need to be bold enough to present those desires to the Lord. Consider Hannah in 1 Samuel, praying so boldly and completely for a child who didn't even exist yet, struggling with being patient in her desires and her want, and grieving so badly for what she didn't have that Eli the priest thought that she was drunk and out of her mind. Her passion and her desire for motherhood was so great, it physically caused her pain. So she prayed and she promised. She promised God that her child would be a godly child, which is confusing to us because she promised to give him back. You desired this thing, and when God finally answers you, you give the child back to him to be raised in the temple by the priests. But the beauty in the story is she didn't abandon him into the temples. One of the sweetest parts of Hannah's story is the account of her returning to him year after year on a regular basis with new clothes. She prayed, she promised, and she provided what was necessary to fulfill the promise. If there is one thing that I would like for you to take away from today, it's that as a parent, a caregiver, whatever your role is in the life of a child, you should be praying for them every day. Every day I wake up, I pray for the health and the safety of my children. I pray for their spouses. Maybe they've met them, maybe they haven't. And I'm also, now that they're adults, praying for them to find a church family. Because there are some things I can't do for them, which we'll get to in a minute, but Jesus can. And I pray for them to be holy, even when I know that that request is going to be a very hard one to give up to the Lord. I believe I may have shared this short story with you before, but I'll share it again with you because it made a big impact on me as a parent. When my children were very young, I was a working parent. I was a single parent for a long time. They had a babysitter named Patty, and she was the best babysitter ever. She made my life infinitely easier. And I had to drop my children off pretty early in the morning. And every time we got to Patty's house, everyone else would still be asleep, and there would be one little light on in her living room. And Patty would be sitting in a chair reading her Bible and praying every morning without exception. Patty was up and Patty was praying. And one morning I went to drop my children off. And instead of praying, Patty was crying hard. And I was a little nervous about leaving the kids. And she said, no, no, I'll be fine. I've just had to ask the Lord to take his hand off of my son. And I said, what? Why would you pray that? And she began to explain to me that they have been having some problems with her oldest son. He's been hanging around with the wrong group of boys. They've been shoplifting. She knows he's been shoplifting. He knows she knows she's been shoplifting, but he's also let her know there's nothing she can do about it. And so she prayed. She prayed for God to take his hand of safety off of her son. And I kid you not, that very night, that boy got arrested. And he spent the night in jail, which happened to be directly across the street from Patty's house. So it wasn't that far away. Still, when you're a high school boy spending the night in jail, it wakes you up a little bit. And that boy never shoplifted again. But it was a massively strong and profound prayer for a mother to pray that in that moment, I didn't quite get. But now I do. Because what we search for the most is for our children to be holy, to belong to the Lord. And sometimes it takes a hard lesson to get us back on that right track. Willing to pray, not just for the good stuff, not just for the easy stuff, but also for the needed stuff, for the holy stuff. Now, we cannot talk about mothers of Scripture without including Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was just a young girl when she was called into motherhood. She teaches us what may be the most profound and hardest parenting lesson of all. And that is there will come a moment when we have to let go. It is not so hard when they're little and we celebrate the milestones of independence with them. Yes, please sleep in your own bed. Yes, you can potty by yourself. Yes, you have your driver's license. Now go get this from the grocery store for me. There are moments when we have to let go. When they're young and we're tired and we have a lot of moments left before us to share, it's not so hard to celebrate that independence. But as they get older and there are less milestones for us to enjoy together, it gets harder to let go. If you're a young mother today, actually, I heard this on somebody's podcast this week, a young mother saying that all they really wanted for Mother's Day was 20 minutes all by themselves. And her husband said, okay, I'll take the kids outside. She said, no, no, you're keeping the kids inside because you're noisy outside. You're keeping the kids inside. I'm going outside for 20 minutes by myself. That's all I want. And as I think about today and I think about where I am in life and each different stages in motherhood, and they're all hard and difficult and joyous at the same time. But today, all I really want is 20 minutes with my kid. 20 minutes. And I drive several hours just to have those 20 minutes. Independence is hard to allow. Yet there are situations our children will have to handle on their own. We want to hold on. We want to protect them. We want to soothe them. We want to comfort them. And sometimes we will just want to take charge of the situation because we know what to do. But we can't. There was a time in the last year where my son, Jake, who's 33, was really struggling with the situation. And he had already come to Jay and myself and asked us for our advice, and we had already given it to him. And yet, when he calls me still struggling, I had so much more advice to give. So many more things to say. And finally, he hung up and then he texted me back and he said, you know, Mom, all I really needed for you to do, because this is already hard enough, is to say that you love me and that you're going to be there. That was a big parenting lesson. There are moments when we have to admit that hearing the words, not my will, but yours, is all too heartbreakingly real. And there is nothing we can do in those moments but love our kids and be present. We should never overlook or forget that Scripture clearly tells us that Mary was there at the cross. Yes, Jesus is God. Yes, Mary knows that. Yet in that moment at Golgotha, he is also the very human son of a very human mother being executed, and there is nothing she can do to make it better. This is not what I wanted for you. Scripture tells us of a time when Mary was in the temple with the infant Jesus, hearing Simeon's prophecies for him and telling her that her own heart would be broken. And scripture tells us that Mary pondered these things in her heart. Did she know that that is what that meant? Would she change her mind if she had known? Would she have said, this will be too hard. This is too painful. This is too much for you to ask of me? Would you have changed your mind if you knew how hard it was going to be? Illness, the accidents, the addiction, the broken hearts, the separation from your family, the phone calls from jail. All the times we sat with, I never wanted this for you. And I wish I could take it away, but I can't. All we can do as parents is be present, like Mary was at the cross. When faced with great suffering and danger, I will be present for you with my love, which, despite disappointment, despite sometimes anger, a parent's love, I think, is the closest to God's love because it doesn't change. There isn't anything you can do to make me love you more, nor anything you can do to make me love you less. The willingness of a mother to sacrifice for her children is one of the greatest qualities of that love. We've mentioned snippets of story from many biblical mothers and the sacrifices they were willing to bear for the benefit of their children. But I'd like to close today with the story of another mother who's not in scripture, but she was surely living out Proverbs 30:30. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. In 1973, the baseball season was pretty exciting because Hank Aaron was closing in on Babe Ruth's record of 714 home runs. And by the end of 1973, Hank Aaron had hit 713 home runs, one short of that record. And Aaron had made the statement that his only fear was that he would not live long enough to play in the 1974 season. You see, this was more than 50 years ago. He was an African American player that was about to topple the great Babe Ruth, who was a baseball legend and a white man. And there were a lot of people in this country who did not like that and did not want to see it happen. Henry Aaron got a lot of fan mail that year, more than 900,000 letters, more than anyone else in the whole United States except for a politician. And more than 100,000 of those letters were hate mail, many of them containing death threats. But in April of 1974, the new season began and he hit a home run in an away game to tie the record. First game of the season. Then the Braves came back to Atlanta for their home opener. It was a night game. It was against the Dodgers and it was completely sold out. Now, as you can imagine, more than 50 years ago, security efforts in large places are not what they are today. So he entered that game knowing that anybody could be there, waiting to do him harm, waiting to keep him from succeeding. His wife was there, his mother was there, his children were there. Anybody could have been there. And he knew that as he stepped up to the plate in the fourth inning and he swung and that ball was gone. It was a home run. And Babe Ruth's record was shattered and the ballpark went crazy. And as Henry Aaron got close to home plate, the dugout emptied as the Braves streamed onto the field to congratulate him and cheer with him and whoop it up. But in the middle of all those baseball players was a short 68-year-old black woman named Estella. She ran out to the field and she grabbed hold of him and wouldn't let go. And he said, "Mom, what are you doing down here?" And she said, "Baby, if they think you're going to get to you, thinking of the death threats her son and her whole family had received. If they're going to get to you, they're going to go through me first. Couldn't take his place in the batting lineup. She couldn't stop hate from crossing his path. She couldn't keep him from doing what he knew he needed to do. But Estella Aaron was present with her love and support, just as we are for our children, and just as God is for us. The truth of being a mother is the final outcome isn't up to you. You pour into the task every day, all that you've got to give. And if you do your job really well, your little chickies take off and fly away. And you find yourself alone and out of the best job you've ever had, and you start buying Christmas presents for your dogs and cats because you just want something to love you, or at least return your text messages. And then there are also some women who desperately wanted chicks in their nest, but they never got them. And we read the beautiful story of Hannah longing for a child and the Lord answering her faithful prayers. But for many women, that didn't happen. For many women for whom it did happen, it was a challenge. And all of that hurts sometimes, the children we have and the children that we don't. Many women avoid church on Mother's Day. And that's why, because sometimes it hurts. Because whether our children are young or grown, whether we're talking regularly or whether we're estranged, whether we feel like we're being fulfilled or we feel like we're failing, whether this is a season of joy or a season of grief, wherever you are in this journey of motherhood or of parenthood, I get it. I know. It's hard, but it's also holy. You're being refined. For there is nothing like taking care of a child to get you way out of your comfort zone and way into holiness. It's not an easy road, and we often make mistakes as we travel it. But we have a lot of examples to lean into. And we have one who is with us no matter what, helping us to be holy.